Hi guys, No Life 4 here. I know it's been a while, but I wanted to make an update considering the whole Unity situation that's going on. Let me begin by stating that I've been a dedicated Unity user and advocate for over a decade, but things are going to change from here. Over the past 4 years, I've observed a company that I once held in high regard consistently missing the mark and making decisions that appear to be nothing short of self sabotage. Don't get me wrong, Epic Games isn't without its faults, but I've rarely witnessed such a combination of incompetence and arrogance from a company wielding as much influence over the video game industry as Unity, except for perhaps EA, which is somewhat ironic considering the background of Unity's CEO. One of Unity's most glaring issues is a repeated history of overpromising and under-delivering. Case in point, Unity's Dots was finally released at the end of 2022, offering an efficient and scalable data-oriented approach to development. However, setting aside my thoughts on the implementation itself, which honestly, I'm not a huge fan of their approach, it's baffling that Unity initially announced it over 5 years ago. Unity devoted extensive resources to Dots, with much of their new technology built with Dots in mind. Unfortunately, this also meant that all other technologies reliant on Dots were left in sort of a limbo. Furthermore, Unity's strategy of building most of their tech on top of Dots imposes a significant upgrade cost, not in monetary terms, but in terms of time and effort. To reap the benefits of Dots, which has been in development for years and has led to the neglect and deprecation of older tech, users are essentially required to rebuild their entire project from scratch to make use of it. And don't get me started on how Unity handled UNet. Unity deprecated UNet in August 2018, which was somewhat justified since UNet had its issues. The problem here was that Unity had no replacement, only promises of one coming in the future. That alone is problematic, but it wouldn't have been that bad if the replacement came within a few months, but instead it was only released at the end of last year. Once again, over 5 years later. For 5 long years, Unity failed to provide an official multiplayer solution. This directly impacted our team back in 2018 when the deprecation of UNet backed us into a corner, effectively forcing us to scrap an entire project, because we had built the entire thing around UNet, and when they deprecated it, it broke a ton of it. Recently, this same mentality has begun to affect Unity's version releases too. They announce a bunch of features coming with an update, only for the update to be delayed until the last moment, often being riddled with issues upon release and sometimes remaining utterly broken for an extended period of time. A prime example of this is Unity 2022.2, which launched in an absolutely deplorable state. We had to update to Unity 2022.2 for a few features and had to deal with constant crashes, instability, and massive issues for months before they were fixed. And some aren't fixed at all. Upon release, the console didn't work, and that's a big deal. You use the console to, see the logged error messages, and without that, it's really difficult to tell what's wrong with your code. The editor constantly crashed, and DX12, one of the major focuses of 2022.2, simply did not and still does not function as intended. It was plagued with problems. LTS used to be a sign of quality and stability, but this is neither. For instance, we encountered an issue with the new renderer features in the scriptable render pipeline, causing a memory leak and the console will throw tons of errors whenever we attempted to blit to the screen. We reported this to Unity support, providing evidence in the form of the editor log and the project repository. Their response blamed it on third-party issue, attributing it to AMD and Vulkan. However, this explanation was simply untrue. Other team members using DX11 or 12 with NVIDIA GPUs were also facing the same problems. I sent a follow-up and reopened the issue, including an editor log from the NVIDIA GPU on DX11. Their response was to double down on their stance, maintaining that it was still an AMD issue, citing information in the log file that simply did not exist. So they either reopened the first log file or hallucinated it. At that point, we decided to tolerate the issue for the time being, hoping for a fix down the line. Thankfully, it has since been fixed, but only in the 2023.1 version, which remains in TechStream and not yet in long-term support, meaning we'd have to deal with all of the bugs and crashes all over again. Furthermore, they've marked the fix as coming to 2022, but they have since removed it from the known issues list. And that was months ago. They said that this fix was coming to our version months and months ago, like half a year ago, and it's still not here. One of Unity's other major issues lies in their consistent failure to understand their core user base, which is primarily smaller developers and indie developers. I remember a time when Unity was praised for its exceptional documentation, abundant resources, and overall ease of learning. However, in recent years, this has completely flipped on its head. Unity's introduced multiple development paths, each with its own set of advantages and disadvantages, forcing users to make critical decisions right from the start. Unfortunately, this has resulted in a convoluted editor, with vastly different tools and features that lack compatibility and shared learning resources. If you choose one path, you have to follow resources and tutorials for that singular path, and sometimes they don't even denote what path they're using. For example, you might look up a tutorial on how to create some effect in a shader, but if the tutorials are all for built-in render pipeline and you're using URP, those tutorials are completely invalid. Adding to the confusion, Unity's documentation has taken a nosedive in quality. Not all documentation is easily accessible from a single location. Some pages lack context or practical examples, and certain features are devoid of any documentation whatsoever. The state of the company's documentation has deteriorated to the point of being unrecognizable. Furthermore, last year, Unity merged with ironSource, a company primarily known for adware, which in my opinion sheds light on Unity's priorities and values and can almost be seen as foreshadowing. When developers expressed their dissatisfaction with this decision, the CEO went as far as to label all developers not interested in monetization the biggest f***ing idiots. In the wake of all of this, Unity has taken the ridiculously stupid step of introducing a runtime tax targeting developers who exceed specific earnings and install thresholds. Their justification is that the fee is intended to target the top 1% of developers, asserting that it won't affect the majority. However, this is clearly not the case when Unity's Pro and Enterprise plans have smaller fees compared to the Personal plan. Why would they do that if they were planning to charge the big guys? This, coupled with the look at the rabbits euthanasia of Unity Plus, it's evident that they're actively attempting to pressure developers into upgrading to higher subscription tiers to evade these charges. The individuals most affected by this move are the small creators with moderately priced games that suddenly experience a breakout hit. Regardless of how many clarifications they provide or assurances they offer that issues like piracy and artificial installs won't trigger these fees, this sets a dangerous precedent. It effectively encourages developers to inflate game prices or resort to excessive microtransactions to afford these rates, which, as we specified earlier, they merged with ironSource, so who knows, maybe that's what they want. The mere concept of a runtime fee is insanity. Imagine if Microsoft charged a fee to all developers using the .NET SDK each time a user installs the runtime for their application. Imagine if Adobe charged a fee every time someone viewed your image you created in Photoshop. Unity expects users to pay these extortionate bills and endure utterly unethical charges while failing to deliver on their promises for prolonged periods and continuously releasing unfinished and buggy software. If you're going to engage in such extortionate practices, the least you can do is deliver a product that justifies the extortion. At this point, it feels like there's little more to add that hasn't already been said by others. Indeed, that's the million-dollar question, isn't it? When you find yourself in a market almost entirely monopolized by two abhorrent corporate entities, your options can seem painfully limited. Godot is a good-looking choice for some, and if it meets your needs, I highly recommend you go with it. But for those making bigger and more complex projects, it simply falls short. Additionally, for some, the process of migrating projects to an entirely new engine can consume a substantial amount of development resources, time, and effort. Over the past year and a half, we've dedicated our efforts to developing technology tailored to our projects within Unity, and discarding this technology simply isn't a viable path for us. We've chosen to stick with Unity for BBT. But that's the extent of it. As of now, all future projects are cancelled or put on permanent hiatus. Regardless of any potential retractions or apologies from Unity, all the trust and optimism we once had in Unity's future as a platform has been torn down, incinerated, and thoroughly trampled. I hope to see Unity improve as a platform, but honestly, I can't see it happening. Thank you guys for watching. I really appreciate it. Hopefully we can figure out where we're going from here, and I hope that all of my fellow developers out there can figure out what they're going to do after all of this, because I think it's pretty clear that Unity is not the way to go.